Well, this is a new one. Now, usually we start off with a joke, but today's story is a bit more serious than that, so here goes. It was a hard life being 37 years old and having skin like leather. You don't get much softer than that. Jackson Carter knew that. But what else could you expect when you'd spent most of your life under the hot Georgia sun? His face was lined like a road map, his arms were the color of burnt umber, and his hands were knotted and scarred. But there was a kind of beauty in those hands. They were the hands of a man who knew the earth, who could coax life out of stubborn soil and sunshine. His father had taught him that. God rest his soul. Now, Jackson's land wasn't much to look at, really. Just 40 acres of red Georgia soil ringed by scraggly pines and live oaks. But to Jackson, it was paradise. Every spring, he'd watch the little watermelons push their way up through the dead leaves, and each summer the vines would take over, inch by green inch. By late July, the fields were a sea of green with splashes of yellow blossoms, and of course, the watermelons. Round, striped balls poking through the vines like children hiding from an angry parent. Jackson knew each one of them like an old friend. He could tell by the weight, the sound of a knock, the shape, whether it was ready for harvest. He wasn't rich, not by a long shot. Most of the watermelons went to a distributor in Atlanta. He sold some to a couple of local stands, but most of his money went into the fields, into seed and fertilizer and diesel for the tractor. What little was left over, he put aside for winter, just enough to pay for his medicine and feed for Rusty. Yeah, Rusty. This old red-boned coonhound was Jackson's only family, his only friend outside of the fields. It was a hard life, but it was Jackson's life, and he liked it that way. Then the rain stopped coming. The skies stayed dry, and the clouds stayed far away. The leaves on the vines began to curl, and the watermelons, they stopped growing. Jackson watched helplessly as his crop withered. Day after day, he watered from the well. He worked through the night. He even asked the town preacher for a prayer or two. But the sun kept beating down and the water kept drying up. It was the worst drought he'd ever seen. By mid-July, most of the crop was gone, and what was left was barely hanging on. Dejected, Jackson sat on his porch watching the sunset. Maybe he'd have to sell the land, he thought. Maybe he'd have to get a real job. Just then, he saw a car pulling up his dirt road. It was a city car, shiny and silver, and out stepped a woman. She couldn't have been older than 22, with long blonde hair and legs that went on for days. She wore cowboy boots and jeans and a t-shirt that said, "I love the dirt on my hands." "You Jackson Carter?" she asked, and he nodded. "I'm Emily. I used to work on a farm down in Florida. I heard you needed help." She'd heard from a neighbor in town that Jackson's farm was struggling, and she came to see if she could help. And so, just like that, the two of them, this weathered old farmer and this fresh-faced city girl, they started working side by side. Emily showed Jackson new irrigation tricks, taught him how to cover the vines during the hottest hours, even introduced him to a special compost blend she used back in Florida. Slowly, the field began to revive. New vines pushed out, hungry for the little water Jackson now hosed on them every morning. And by late August, when the other farmers around him had already given up, Jackson had a small harvest. It wasn't the biggest one he'd ever had, but it was the sweetest. That year, when the sun set over the fields, Jackson wasn't alone on the porch. He had Emily to share it with. And somewhere, deep in the red Georgia soil, a small patch of watermelons ripened, plump and juicy, a testament to the quiet dignity of farm life.